Have you ever met someone so blindingly, unapologetically full of themselves that you actually start to wonder if they're living in a completely different dimension? Well, that was my husband, Arthur. He didn't just think he was smart. He genuinely believed he was the next Shakespeare, a literal mega genius walking among mere mortals. For 3 years, I funded his dream, worked 2 jobs, and quietly took his condescending remarks, all because I believed in his passion. But the moment he looked me in the eye and told me my average pea-sized brain couldn't possibly comprehend his masterpiece, that was the exact second I decided to destroy his entire career. And trust me, what I did next? It didn't just ruin his dream, it humbled him in front of the entire internet forever. Let's back up a little bit. My name is Clara, I'm 28, and up until about 3 months ago, I was married to Arthur. Arthur is a writer. Well, let me rephrase that. Arthur called himself a writer. In reality, Arthur was a guy who sat in our spare bedroom, drinking expensive fair trade coffee that I paid for, typing furiously on a MacBook that I bought him, while producing absolutely nothing that ever saw the light of day. When we first got married, I fell for the struggling artist charm. He was passionate, he read heavy philosophy books, and he spoke with this articulate, slow cadence that made him sound incredibly sophisticated. So when he came to me 3 years ago and said, "Clara, darling, the corporate world is suffocating my creative soul. I need to quit my job and dedicate myself entirely to writing the great American novel," I nodded. I smiled. I said, I got you, babe. I took on a second job doing freelance graphic design on top of my 9-to-5 marketing gig. I paid the rent, the groceries, his health insurance, and even his premium subscription to those fancy writing softwares. Every time I asked how the book was going, he would give me this deeply patronizing smile, pat my head like I was a golden retriever, and say, "It's coming along, Clara, but please don't ask to read it yet. The narrative structure is highly complex, utilizing advanced metaphorical frameworks. I don't want you to get confused." At first I thought, okay, maybe he's just protective of his draft. But as the months turned into years, the condescension grew into full-blown narcissism. He started texting his friends and even me from the other room, boasting about his own intellect. One day, I literally received a text from him while I was cooking dinner that read, "I just wrote a paragraph so profound it brought me to tears. I'm a mega genius, Clara. The literary world isn't ready for me." I stared at my phone, burned the garlic bread, and thought, who even talks like this? The breaking point started approaching when Arthur's attitude began leaking out into the real world. We went out for drinks with my coworkers one Friday night, a rare treat because, again, we were living strictly on my income. My boss, a super chill guy named Marcus, asked Arthur what his book was about. Arthur took a slow sip of his IPA, looked Marcus up and down, and scoffed. "If I told you, it would just sound like words to you." My book explores the existential dread of the postmodern proletariat through a non-linear temporal lens. Unless you've deeply studied 19th century French philosophy, it would go completely over your head. The table went dead silent. Marcus laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. On the drive home, I snapped, "Arthur, what the hell was that?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel. "You completely insulted my boss. You can't just go around calling people stupid." Arthur sighed, looking out the passenger window like he was a tragic hero in an indie movie. "Clara, I'm not calling them stupid. I'm simply acknowledging reality. Genius is a lonely island. A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of sheep. You, of all people, should understand that. Though I suppose your daily routine consists of clicking buttons on Photoshop, so I shouldn't expect you to grasp high art." I pulled the car over. My heart was pounding. "Excuse me? My clicking buttons pays for the roof over your head, Arthur. It pays for the very food you eat." He just rolled his eyes. "And I am deeply grateful for your financial sponsorship, Clara. Truly. When I win the Pulitzer, I'll be sure to mention you in the acknowledgments. Now, please, let's not argue. It ruins my creative flow for the morning." A month later, Arthur finally announced that the manuscript was finished. 300 pages of pure, unadulterated brilliance. He printed it out, bound it in a leather portfolio, and kept it on his desk like it was the Holy Grail. "I am sending it to top-tier literary agents tomorrow," he declared proudly at breakfast. "Random House, Penguin, HarperCollins, they're going to engage in a bidding war, I'm certain of it." "Can I read it now?" I asked, genuinely curious. Despite his awful attitude, part of me desperately wanted him to succeed so I could finally stop working 70 hours a week. Arthur hesitated, then smirked. "Fine. You can read the first 3 chapters, but remember, Clara, it's highly experimental. Don't feel bad if you don't get the subtext." That night, after he went to sleep, I poured myself a massive glass of wine, sat on the couch, and opened the leather folder. I was prepared for something dense, maybe a bit boring, but technically brilliant. What I actually read was the most hilarious, embarrassing, atrocious piece of garbage I have ever seen in my entire life. It wasn't just bad, it was violently awful. Arthur had abused a thesaurus to a criminal degree. Every single sentence was filled with words that nobody has used since the year 1740. Here is an actual, literal sentence from chapter 1. The incandescent orb of the celestial sky wept its golden blood upon the melancholic asphalt, mirroring the fractured psyche of Bartholomew's internal tapestry. Translation? It was a sunny day on a paved road. The plot made absolutely no sense. The main character, Bartholomew, who was clearly just a self-insert of Arthur, was a deeply misunderstood intellectual whom every woman desperately wanted to sleep with, and every man envied. The dialogue sounded like aliens trying to imitate humans after reading an old dictionary. It was completely unreadable. I sat there in the dark, laughing so hard tears were streaming down my face. This was the mega genius work? This was what I sacrificed my 20s to fund? The next morning, Arthur was glowing. He was pouring his coffee, looking incredibly smug. Well, did you read it? Did the prose move you to the core? I swallowed hard, trying to find a nice way to say it. Arthur, but it's definitely unique, but, don't you think the language is a little too wordy? Like, maybe you could tone down the vocabulary so the reader can actually understand the plot? Arthur's smile instantly vanished. His face turned bright red, and his eyes narrowed. Tone it down? He whispered, his voice trembling with pure rage. You want me to dilute my art? For who? The masses? For people with average pea-sized brains like yours? I froze. What did you just say to me? You heard me, Clara, he yelled, slamming his coffee mug on the counter. This is exactly why I didn't want to show you. You spend your days looking at color palettes and fonts. You don't have the intellectual capacity to understand literary genius. You are a critic trying to tell a master painter how to use a brush. Don't ever critique my work again. Just stick to paying the bills. He grabbed his leather folder, stormed into the spare bedroom, and slammed the door so hard, a picture frame fell off the hallway wall. I stood in the kitchen, completely numb. The veil had finally dropped. He didn't love me. He didn't respect me. He saw me as a glorified bank account, a lesser being meant to serve his delusion. Right then and there, the sadness died, and pure, cold, calculating revenge took over. I knew exactly what I needed to do. If Arthur wanted an honest critique from the real world, I was going to give it to him, but I wasn't going to let him know it came from me. That afternoon, while he was out at a coffee shop pretending to be an intellectual, I went into his room. I opened his laptop. He never locked it because he assumed I wasn't smart enough to bypass it, found the digital manuscript file, and copied the first 5 chapters. I went to Reddit. I created a throwaway account and went straight to the subreddit r/Amithedevil, a place where people post stories about individuals who are completely toxic, narcissistic, and oblivious to their own terrible behavior. I wrote a post from Arthur's perspective. I channeled his exact voice, his exact arrogance, and his exact texts. Title: AITA for telling my average-brained wife that she doesn't have the intellectual capacity to understand my masterpiece novel. Body: I, 31M, am a writer. My wife, 28F, works a basic corporate job and funds our lifestyle while I create high art. I just finished my manuscript, which I know for a fact is a mega genius piece of literature. My wife read the first few chapters and had the audacity to tell me to tone it down and make it simpler. I got angry and told her the truth. Her pea-sized brain cannot comprehend my complex metaphorical frameworks. She's been quiet ever since. I think she's just jealous of my superior intellect. So, Reddit, AITA for protecting my artistic integrity from a basic critic? P.S. To prove my point, here is the opening excerpt of my novel so you can see the sheer brilliance for yourselves. And right beneath that, I pasted the first 3 pages of his atrocious thesaurus-heavy manuscript. I hit post, shut his laptop, and waited. I knew the internet could be brutal, but I completely underestimated the sheer speed and power of Reddit when it encounters a true narcissist. Within 2 hours, the post absolutely exploded. By the time Arthur came home that evening, the post had over 15,000 upvotes and 8,000 comments. It was trending on the front page of the internet. I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, watching the chaos unfold. The comments were an absolute goldmine. One user wrote, OP writes like an alien who found a dictionary in a dumpster and tried to write a romance novel. This is physical pain in text form. Another commented, your poor wife is working 2 jobs to feed a man who thinks the incandescent orb of the celestial sky is a good writing. Sis, if you're reading this, leave his broke, delusional ass immediately. A third one, which got 10,000 likes, said, this isn't just an asshole. This is a textbook r/Am-I-the-devil creature. He belongs in a museum of pure, unadulterated cringe. The book reads like a middle schooler trying to sound smart after failing English class. People were tearing his prose apart word by word, memeing the sentences and calling him every variation of an entitled loser imaginable. It was a beautiful, glorious slaughterhouse of his ego. Around 8 p.m., Arthur came out of his room, looking pale. He was holding his phone, his hands literally shaking. Clara, he stammered, his voice sounding incredibly weak. Something terrible has happened. What's wrong, babe? I asked, putting on my best worried wife face. Someone hacked my computer, he gasped, sitting down heavily on the armchair. They stole my manuscript, and they posted it on this horrible website called Reddit. They made a fake story about us, pretending I said awful things about you." "Oh my God, really?" I said, gasping dramatically. "Let me see." He handed me his phone. I pretended to read the post, shaking my head in horror. "Wow, Arthur, this is viral. Look at all these comments. Wow, they really, really hate your writing." "They're trolls. They're uncultured swine," Arthur shouted, his voice cracking. "They don't understand postmodernism. Look what this one said. They called my dialogue the grammatical equivalent of stepping on a Lego. How dare they?" I stood up, walked over to him, and looked down at him. The fake worry completely vanished from my face. I gave him the coldest, most satisfied smile I had ever generated. "Actually, Arthur," I said, my voice completely calm, "they aren't trolls. They're giving you the exact, honest feedback you deserve, and nobody hacked you." Arthur blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I posted it," I said clearly. The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur's jaw dropped. He looked at me like I had just grown a second head. "You? Why would you do that? You ruined my reputation. You exposed my work." "No, Arthur, I exposed you," I said, crossing my arms. "You wanted to know if you were a mega genius. Turns out the entire world thinks you're a laughingstock. You insulted my intelligence, you took my money, you treated me like dirt under your shoe while I sacrificed everything to support your lazy ass. So, I let the internet decide who the real devil was. And guess what? It's you." Arthur tried to scream. He tried to argue. He tried to bring up his artistic vision again, but the fight was completely drained out of him. The weight of 20,000 strangers calling him a delusional, untalented clown had utterly shattered his glass ego. He couldn't even look me in the eye. That very night, I handed him a packed suitcase. "You have until tomorrow morning to find a new place to stay. Go live with your parents. Let them fund your genius, because I am officially retired from being your sugar mama." He left the next morning, crying, dragging his suitcase down the driveway. It's been 3 months since that day. I filed for divorce immediately, and since I was the only one actually earning money, the legal process was surprisingly clean. I kept the apartment, kicked my second job to the curb, and finally have time to breathe, relax, and enjoy my own life. As for Arthur, last I heard, he's living in his mom's basement in Ohio. He deleted his social media accounts because people kept commenting the incandescent orb of the celestial sky on his photos. He's currently working as a cashier at a local bookstore. I guess he's finally surrounded by great literature. He's just the one scanning it at the register. So, am I the devil for destroying my ex-husband's writing career and shattering his ego? Honestly, I don't care. Because for the first time in 3 years, the sun is shining, my bank account is full, and I am finally free.